Before we begin, thank you very much to T-Ranger for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the support. Every little bit in Patreon helps the daily content keep coming, keeps the daily grind grinding. And right now, when I have so many projects in the works, that is really, really appreciated. Thank you everyone for pitching in. So, we are beyond the here's 10s devoted to the best toy of every year, meaning we can do whatever we want. The format is no longer being held hostage, which means we can start getting into a lot of the top 10s that were requested of me in the last year or so. So now we can get into those. And the first one I'm going to tackle is our top 10 favorite dinosaurs in Transformers. But here's the trick. We're not talking about toys. We are talking about in-series character. Okay, that does differentiate things a little bit. Now, obviously, because he's the de facto dinosaur, expect more than one Grimlock on this list. That's just going to be how it goes, okay? Nothing we can do about that. But you know what? There's still plenty we can talk about. And honestly, I tried to avoid Dinobots as much as I could. This is an interesting list when you break it down. So, with no further ado, here are my top 10 Transformers who happen to be dinosaurs. I'm throwing in the most recent addition to the dinosaur cast of Transformers when I include Jawbreaker from Earthspark. And I think one reason I like him so much is because his personality is so atypical of most dinosaur Transformers. You know, since dinosaurs tend to be big, powerful things, then they are usually depicted in robot mode and in character to be big and powerful, and I kind of like the characters who go against that grain. Jawbreaker is a character who is very sweet and loving to his family and his friends. He has confidence issues despite how powerful and strong he is. It took him a while to even find his way and to be comfortable with what his alt mode was going to be. He tells a very different story than your standard Dinobot, in other words. He's an enjoyable character. It's a very enjoyable character. And one that I hope escapes Earthspark at some point, because I'd love to see, you know, like maybe a more proper Dinobot take on him at some point. It's just an interesting dynamic, and it does create a fun-loving character who is just, like, charming to watch. So, yeah, and this is, again, getting into, like, Earthspark is badly written. No, it's not. No, it's not. Give it a chance. We have some very strong characters in this series. Jawbreaker's certainly one of them. As far as, like, Dinobots who stand out, he's definitely up there. So this one definitely deserves a spot on the list, but honestly, it's going to be a lot lower than most people think, and he was lower than I originally thought he would be. But the more I looked him up and the more I really thought about it, yeah, I want him on the list, but I don't think I can put Magnetar any higher than this. He is a ferocious Predacon leader, or I should properly say Destron leader. And you know what? He is a really, really cool concept. As a villain, he is driven by the desire to overcome previous Destron leaders. He wants the Emperor of Destruction title all to himself, and for the most part, he plays the general. He sits back and lets his minions do his work for him, unless he gets a chance to fight off Big Convoy. Now, honestly, that kind of puts him in a role of just a standard big bad villain guy. What lets him stand apart and what lets me put him on the list is the fact that despite his ambitions, he is not above changing his focus if there is something that is a more pressing matter, like for instance Unicron showing up and being forced to work with the Cybertrons to thwart him. Okay, now you're playing a little bit more to a little bit of personality here. You know, he's not single-minded. He actually has a little bit of character and depth to him. And if the ending of Beast Wars Neo is to be believed, he's also willing to work with Cybertrons to rebuild as well. You know, it seems like it's weird in how they resolve that series, but it actually kind of ends peacefully, which is kind of rare in these shows. So with that, yeah, I'll put Magnetar on the list, though I do kind of wish he did a little bit more as a villain character. He just kind of stands like, anime antagonist. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it just doesn't get you very high up in this book. It's the first of our Grimlocks on this list, and I'm going to put one from a series that I think is way underrated. This is Cyberverse Grimlock. When this was first announced, I was really wondering if they were going in the right direction here. I kind of doubted this idea of like, oh, Grimlock has a brain on him. Like, Grimlock actually speaks well. Like, he's almost a little bit sophisticated, which is not something I would ever expect out of a Grimlock, much less the evergreen-styled Grimlock who is covered with spikes and missile launchers. It's the split personality aspect where he reverts to his traditional, power above everything and like me Grimlock smash type speech pattern when he's in beast mode that makes him a little bit more interesting. So it's kind of a dual personality thing going on with this Grimlock. And honestly, adventurous, talkative Grimlock is not a bad take. I actually had fun with this iteration of the character, and I'm glad they introduced him quickly enough to where, like, the rest of the Cyberverse cast didn't drown him out. Like, he actually got enough time to actually showcase himself. And then later on, when RC shows up and they can reminisce about their past adventures, you start figuring out the character a lot more. So, yeah, he's very enjoyable. Like, for a Grimlock that I went in very hesitant about, I'm surprised at what an impression he left on me. It's a very, very fun take on Grimlock. One that I wouldn't mind them doing. It seems like they have. It seems like even Earthspark Grimlock kind of follows in the footsteps of this one. So, hopefully we get past Grimlock being a dumb lummox, or at least stick that strictly to his beast mode. I think it's a fun way of covering both sides of what this character usually is. It's really not fair of me to stick to Cyberverse 2 entries in a row, but that's just kind of how this shook out. We have to talk about one of my favorites from that show, and that is Swoop. Keep in mind, Swoop has always been my favorite Dinobot, has been since I was a little child. However, when you make Swoop, and here's the thing, this is purely a me thing. Because in my head, Swoop always kind of struck me as like the smart one out of the Dinobots. I don't know why kid me kind of pulled that, but that's what happened. A young TJOmega thought, oh, Swoop seems to be the smart one here. I mean, in retrospect, maybe not. Maybe not. But you know what? I love that they embraced it. Someone else saw that and made, like, Swoop a brainiac on par with Perceptor, even. And then they've gender flipped Swoop to be a girl. And you know what? I don't mind in the least. This is fun. Having a female Dinobot on the team works. Making it the svelte small one kind of works. It kind of falls into the girl is the smart one trope. But I still think this is a really fun take on Swoop, and one that I really wish got more justice. I would have loved to have seen her in more episodes. I would have loved for her to get a toy that wasn't just a gimmicky auto changer. That's frustrating. I love this iteration. I really, really love this iteration of Swoop. And again, similar to how Cyberverse Grimlock kind of paved the way for our current Grimlocks, I kind of hope Swoop follows the same. I would not mind seeing this take again. Certainly wouldn't mind her getting more screen time. I stan Girl Swoop in this house. Grimlock number 2 on the list, so take your guess right now which universe he comes from. I need to move on, so I'm not going to give you too much time to think. It's the IDW Grimlock. IDW just plays characters really well sometimes, and Grimlock is an interesting take. Now, to begin with, you are getting very much a similar setup to where if you had read Marvel Grimlock, or if you had read even Dreamwave Grimlock, he feels like he has a similar vibe. You know, he starts off as the Dinobots, the DYNO bots, and he's, very militaristic team, still rogue and renegade, and still sent on a mission to go after Shockwave. The problem here is that this Grimlock disobeys that order, which means everything kind of changes from that point on. Grimlock finds himself outcast from even the Dinobots. He finds himself a prisoner. He finds himself brain damaged at one point, and eventually falling in with the Scavengers, a team of Decepticons completely uninterested in any ongoing war, who just kind of wants to be left alone to do their own adventures, and I love the Scavengers. So seeing Grimlock with them added an interesting twist, more to the fact that he actually ended up liking them in the end. That's the weirdest part. But because of that, it adds like an interesting twist to the Grimlock himself, because that's not something prior Grimlocks would have done. A Decepticon would have been like on site, and then and there wouldn't be anything left but scraps by the time Grimlock was done. He gave a few cons a chance here. They took care of him, and in trade, he becomes the muscle of the team. Kind of an interesting way of turning things around, to have this. It's a lot of character change and growth for this Grimlock, and it's a fun read. It makes him interesting. Maybe he'd be higher up if he had started off a little bit differently. Like I said, it tells a familiar story at first, but where it goes, I ended up really liking. Here's one I'm really happy to be talking about, because he's that guy in his Combiner team. Every Combiner team has that guy, and for the Dino Force, it's Kakuryu. This guy is just endearing. Absolutely endearing. He comes across as someone who is a Destron, mostly because he's bullied into it by his teammates, which is unfair to him. He is not really interested in the war either. He's not really a bad guy. He's just lumped in with some bad people. He'd much rather just kind of play with kids, which is how he ends up in the series. He just kind of ends up hanging out on Earth and basically becoming a daycare center himself. Extended fiction would eventually have him joining the Autobots and becoming Grim Master. Their version of the power, the Power Core Combiners. Like, that's him. Instead of getting Grimstone, no, it's Kakuryu upgraded into an Autobot. In the show, he is done as comic relief, but in a Waspinator-like way, it just makes you love the guy. So he plays a pretty good part of his team, and really, like, someone who never really should have been a Decepticon, a Destron, whatever you want to call him. This guy should have been one of the Dinobots, and at least as far as the future and the extended fiction goes, it is nice to see he made it there. Now, would you believe that there is an IDW Dinobot that I actually like more than Grimlock? Now, there are some interesting ones. Strafe tells an interesting story, but Strafe turns into a monster, so she is out. No, it's not just Dinobots here. We are going for dinosaurs. So in this case, I'm giving a nod to Slug. Anger-driven and hostile to a T, but a character who shows a lot of growth as the series goes on. This Slug holds the distinction of doing something that only Grimlock to that point could ever attest to, and that is lead the Dinobots. After Grimlock refuses his orders and the Dinobots separate from him, he actually takes leadership of who remains, and it's his call to make Strafe the 5th Dinobot once she joins up. He develops a lot, going from this basically just a character of pure anger to gaining more responsibility, gaining more friendships. He has a friendship with Trypticon that's actually really interesting and endearing. That Trypticon almost made this list too, because it's an interesting take on the character. It just didn't last long enough for me to really make a fair judgment. But Slug here, yeah, Slug is a full circle character. He meets his final moments, realizing who he is, realizing his mistakes, realizing that things might be better without him. But you know what? That's character growth. Slug tells an interesting story, and in ways, yeah, I like Slug better than I liked Grimlock in IDW. It's weird to have a fiction where that is true, but in this case, yeah, Slug, however you want to call him, yeah, they gave him a really good run in IDW, and I really appreciate it. It made me really enjoy a character that normally I just kind of ignore. At number 3, we have Grimlock number 3, and you should know which one this one is. It is Simon Furman's baby boy, the original Marvel Grimlock. This one is completely different, and he is the blueprint of which all modern comic book Grimlocks are judged. He is intelligent, calculating, very powerful on the battlefield, and still very anti-authority. He is the one who is essentially the most, the most likely rival to Optimus Prime when it comes to leadership of the Autobots. And he would eventually get a turn as leader of the Autobots. He faces so many rivalries. This is the one where, we actually did have that Shockwave origin, in which he actually did carry through the orders, and eventually woke up on Earth in the modern day as, the T-Rex robot. This is Simon Furman at his best, because this is his boy. Grimlock was his boy, so he made sure he had a very cool character out of him. Powerful, confident, very capable leader, even capable of replacing Optimus Prime for a time. And still carrying the hero banner while he does it. This is a much more complex Grimlock, and this is a really, really cool take on the character. Like I said, pretty much every intelligent Grimlock takes his blueprint from this one. And everyone tries to improve upon it, but there is still a charm to the original. Which I guess is what happens when Grimlock's very first fanboy is the one doing the writing. So yeah, I have to give the nod to this Grimlock. It is a very well done character and story, and yeah, he goes through a lot. It's a fun read. As soon as I saw this request, I knew the number 2 and the number 1 would not be fair choices, because there are just 2 dinosaur characters that come from a series known for exceptional writing. So we have to make them the number 2 and the number 1. It's just a matter of which one comes first. Megatron first. And this is a very tough call. Honestly, you know who number 1 is at this point. You could have flipped a coin, and I could have told you either one was correct in number 2 or number 1 spot. This is all down to personal preference. And I do love this Megatron. He is smart, he is calculating, he is planning big things that no Megatron before or even after has dared to imagine. This is a Megatron who knew how to wipe out all of Autobots from existence and still held off because even he knew it was too big of a risk. This is a Megatron who was always multiple steps ahead of everyone, a master manipulator, knowing exactly what the right people need to hear at the right time in order to get them to do exactly what he wants, and it's all according to plan. This is probably the best tactician of a Megatron we have ever had, and potentially, considering he was trying to unwind time itself, potentially the most dangerous. He is suave, he is charismatic, he is everything that a Megatron really should be. And yeah, it's just, this is still one of my favorite Megatrons of all time, which makes him one of my favorite dinosaur Transformers of all time. However, he just happens to share a series with someone who is considered by some to be one of the best written Transformer characters of all time, who just happens to also be a dinosaur. I said I was trying to avoid Dinobots. Okay, well, fine, like half the list is Dinobots. But Dinobot himself has to be the number 1. It has to be. It has to be. It's a Predacon with a moral code. And even though he has Predacon values, that moral code means that he's better suited with the Maximals. At first because he wanted leadership and to destroy Megatron himself, but the character develops and grows. He struggles with his own destiny, his own place in the universe. He struggles with his morality. And things like his friendships with Rat Trap that is, both antagonistic and even brotherly at times. It is his constant quest to discover who he is and what his destiny is, and then reaching a point where it's no longer important to him to overthrow take leadership of the Maximals or destroy Megatron. He genuinely becomes a better person. He genuinely becomes someone who actually wants to protect what will eventually be humanity, which leads to his sacrifice, one of the most tragic moments in Transformer history. And waxing Shakespearean as he does it. This is an incredibly complex character who tells a full circle story. Never mind the clone. Never mind the clone ruining that. But yeah, to this day, this is going to be true for a long time. If we're talking dinosaur Transformers, Dinobot's always going to be my favorite. That's just how it goes. He is one of the best written characters of all time. And I would defend that any chance I am given. And that, my friends, is our Here's 10 for the day. As always, I'm sure I forgot a few, so you are free to leave that in the comments below. Please let me know that I should have put Megatron at number 1. Please tell me I should have put Magnetar higher. I know everyone's got a different opinion. As long as you're civil about it, you're free to share it in the comments below. But that is it for me today. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.
You've been waiting a long time, haven't you? But the wait's almost over. You're about to meet the brightest star in the universe. We're going to make an impact.